February 17th, 1943, 0340 hours, North Atlantic, 350 miles south of Iceland. Lieutenant Commander James Thornton clung to the bridge railing as HMS Campanula buried her bow in another massive wave, the corvette's entire forward section disappearing beneath grey-green water before somehow clawing back to the surface. Salt spray, mixed with sleet, lashed the bridge, coating everything in ice that made every surface treacherous. The temperature was barely above freezing. Thornton had been on watch for 6 hours, would remain for another 2, because convoy HX-224 needed every pair of eyes scanning for U-boats in conditions that made seeing anything beyond 50 meters nearly impossible. The Aztec operator's voice crackled through the voice tube. Contact bearing 270, range 800 yards, moving left to right. Thornton's exhaustion vanished instantly. U-boat. Close. Too close. It was probably already lining up torpedo shots on the merchant ship's Campanula was supposed to protect. He grabbed the engine telegraph and rang for full speed, shouting orders that sent crew scrambling to action stations, despite the pitching deck that made every movement dangerous. Campanula turned hard, her single propeller thrashing water, her hull heeling over at angle that seemed impossible for vessel to maintain without capsizing. But she held, completed the turn, steadied on intercept course toward the submerged U-boat. The depth charge crew on the stern worked frantically to arm charges, their movements practiced despite numbing cold and violent motion that threatened to throw them overboard with every roll. "Drop pattern," Thornton ordered as Campanula passed over estimated U-boat position. 8 depth charges rolled off the stern racks, their hydrostatic fuses set to detonate at different depths. Campanula's engine labored to pull the corvette away from the explosions. Being too close when charges detonated could damage the ship that dropped them. The explosions came seconds later, massive underwater blasts that lifted Campanula's stern and shook every rivet in her hull. Water erupted in white plumes that rose higher than the ship's mast before collapsing back into the sea. Thornton ordered the corvette back toward the position, watching for signs of success. Debris, oil, bodies. The Aztec operator reported losing contact, but whether that meant destruction or escape was impossible to determine in the chaos of post-explosion turbulence. Dawn came slowly, revealing empty ocean where the U-boat had been. No oil slick, no wreckage. Probably escaped then, or maybe destroyed so deep that debris hadn't surfaced. They'd never know for certain. Thornton ordered return to escort position with the convoy, where Campanula would resume her station, protecting merchant ships carrying supplies Britain desperately needed. Another attack, another uncertain outcome, another day survived in the war that naval strategists were calling the Battle of the Atlantic, the campaign that would determine whether Britain could continue fighting or would be starved into surrender. The strategic equation. Britain's survival depended entirely on maintaining sea communications across the Atlantic Ocean against German submarine campaign designed to sever those communications and force British surrender through starvation and economic collapse. The mathematics were brutally simple. Britain imported approximately 60% of its food and most of its oil, strategic materials, and manufactured goods from overseas. When war began, this import dependence was strategic vulnerability that Germany immediately recognized and exploited. The Kriegsmarine's U-boat fleet was specifically designed to attack Britain's merchant shipping, sinking vessels carrying food and supplies faster than they could be replaced. The initial German success was devastating. In 1940, U-boats sank over 1,000 merchant ships, totaling approximately 4 million tons. In 1941, losses exceeded 4.5 million tons. In 1942, losses peaked at over 8 million tons, approximately 1,400 ships destroyed, their cargoes lost, their crews often killed. If these loss rates continued, Britain would run out of shipping capacity to maintain imports necessary for survival. The civilian population would starve, war industries would halt for lack of raw materials, military forces would run out of fuel and ammunition. Britain's response required protecting merchant convoys with escort vessels that could detect and destroy U-boats before they could attack cargo ships. But the Royal Navy faced massive resource problem. Capital ships, battleships, cruisers, fleet destroyers were needed for other operations and couldn't be spared for convoy escort duty that required hundreds of vessels operating continuously. Traditional destroyer construction was too slow and too expensive to produce adequate escorts quickly. Britain needed cheap, simple escort vessels that could be built rapidly by small shipyards using minimal resources. The solution was the Flower-class corvette, a design based on commercial whaling ships that could be constructed quickly using civilian shipbuilding facilities. The corvettes were small, only 205 feet long, displacing just over 900 tons. They were slow, maximum speed 16 knots, barely faster than submerged U-boats. They were poorly armed, a single 4-inch gun, some anti-aircraft weapons, and depth charges for anti-submarine attacks. They were uncomfortable, cramped, wet, prone to violent motion in heavy seas. But they could be built in 8 months by yards that had never constructed warships, cost approximately £90,000 each compared to over £1 million for fleet destroyers. And they could escort convoys through North Atlantic conditions that would test any vessel, the ships and their crews. The Flower-class corvettes earned their floating coffin nickname through combination of dangerous working conditions and genuine vulnerability to enemy action. The ships were approximately 62 meters long, with beam of just over 10 meters, dimensions that made them exceptionally lively in heavy seas. The hull form, derived from whaling vessels designed for stability while stationary, was poorly suited for sustained high-speed operations in Atlantic storms. The corvettes rolled violently, pitched dramatically, and took water over their bows regularly. Seasickness was universal among new crews and common even among experienced sailors. Everything not permanently secured became projectile during heavy weather. Sleep was nearly impossible when the ship was at sea because motion was too violent for rest. The accommodation was Spartan even by wartime military standards. The crew of approximately 80 men was housed in spaces designed for 35 on the original whaling vessel design. Bunks were stacked 3 high with minimal personal space. Ventilation was poor, creating atmosphere that was simultaneously cold and stuffy, laden with diesel fumes and human odors. Water condensed on cold metal bulkheads, dripping constantly and keeping everything damp. Heating was inadequate for North Atlantic winters, leaving crew chronically cold. Rats were common despite efforts to eliminate them. The working conditions were harsh beyond what peacetime labor standards would accept. Watch duty required standing exposed to weather for 4-hour shifts, often in freezing temperatures, with spray and precipitation adding to discomfort. Action stations could be called at any time, requiring crew to rush to positions, regardless of conditions or their state of rest. Maintenance was constant necessity. The ship's systems were stressed beyond design limits by continuous operations in severe conditions, creating endless mechanical problems that required repair at sea using limited tools and spare parts. Yet crews adapted and even developed fierce pride in their uncomfortable vessels. The corvettes might be small and wet and miserable, but they were also durable and surprisingly capable. Sailors learned that their ships, while uncomfortable, would survive conditions that seemed impossible. The corvettes might roll through angles that felt like capsizing, but they'd recover, might take waves over the bow that buried the forward gun platform, but they'd emerge, might labor through storms that seemed unendurable, but they'd keep going. The knowledge that their uncomfortable ships were fundamentally seaworthy helped crews endure conditions that broke morale on more comfortable but less robust vessels. The tactical evolution. Convoy escort duty required maintaining defensive screen around merchant ships for days or weeks while crossing Atlantic in all weather conditions, with constant threat of U-boat attack. A typical convoy consisted of 30 to 60 merchant ships arranged in columns, traveling at speed of slowest vessel, typically 8 to 10 knots. The escort group included multiple corvettes, plus sometimes a destroyer or two if available, arranged in protective screen around the merchants. Each escort was responsible for sector of ocean around the convoy, maintaining position through continuous navigation and ship handling that was exhausting for bridge crews. The escort's effectiveness improved dramatically through 1943 as equipment upgrades and tactical refinements transformed convoy defense from reactive to proactive operations. Radar arrived on escorts in quantity during 1942-1943, providing ability to detect surface U-boats at night when they were most dangerous. The radar sets were primitive by later standards, bulky, unreliable, limited in range, but they gave escorts crucial advantage of detecting U-boats before visual contact. Surface U-boats that had relied on darkness for concealment were suddenly vulnerable to detection at ranges of several miles, fundamentally changing tactical balance. High-frequency direction-finding equipment, HUF-DUF, allowed escorts to detect U-boat radio transmissions and determine their direction. When U-boats radioed position reports to coordinate wolfpack attacks, HUF-DUF operators could identify the transmission's bearing, allowing escorts to intercept U-boats before they reached attack positions. The capability turned German coordination tactics against them. Every radio transmission revealed submarine positions to defenders who could respond proactively. The Hedgehog weapon system replaced traditional depth charges on many escorts by 1943. Unlike depth charges that were rolled off stern and detonated at preset depths, Hedgehog fired pattern of small projectiles ahead of the attacking ship. The projectiles sank and detonated only on contact with submarine hulls, eliminating uncertainty about whether near misses had inflicted damage. Hedgehog also allowed escorts to maintain ASDIC contact during attacks because the weapon was fired ahead rather than dropped astern, where explosion turbulence disrupted sonar. Long-range maritime patrol aircraft extended escorts' detection range dramatically. Aircraft could search hundreds of square miles of ocean, detecting surfaced U-boats and forcing them to dive or attacking them directly. The notorious Mid-Atlantic Gap, the ocean area beyond land-based aircraft range where U-boats operated freely, was closed by very long-range Liberator bombers that provided air cover across the entire Atlantic. U-boats that surfaced to transit or to attack convoys faced aerial detection and attack, forcing them to remain submerged where they were slow and vulnerable to surface escorts. These technological improvements were combined with tactical refinements based on operational experience. Escort groups operated as coordinated teams rather than individual ships, with assigned roles and practice procedures for various scenarios. Support groups, additional escorts beyond convoy's primary screen, reinforced threatened convoys, allowing sustained anti-submarine operations while maintaining convoy protection. The tactics evolved from purely defensive screen to aggressive hunter-killer operations that actively sought and destroyed U-boats rather than merely driving them away. May 1943, the turning point. The combination of improved equipment, refined tactics, and increased escort numbers created conditions in May 1943 where U-boat losses became unsustainable for German operations. The month began with approximately 100 German U-boats operating in North Atlantic, their highest deployment level of the war. German Naval Command believed they were close to achieving decisive victory, sinking Allied shipping faster than it could be replaced, forcing Britain to negotiate peace before American industrial capacity could overwhelm German capabilities. The U-boats were coordinated in large wolf packs, attacking multiple convoys simultaneously to overwhelm escort defenses. But the tactical situation had changed fundamentally without German command fully recognizing it. The escorts now had radar, HFDF, Hedgehog, and air support. They operated in larger, better coordinated groups. Their crews had years of operational experience. The U-boats that had dominated Atlantic in 1940–1942 were facing opponents who'd learned their tactics and developed effective counters. The slaughter began immediately. Convoy ONS-5 in early May was attacked by over 40 U-boats but lost only 13 merchant ships while sinking 6 submarines and damaging several others, an exchange rate that favored the defenders dramatically. Convoy HX-237 was attacked by 30 U-boats and lost only 3 merchants while sinking 3 submarines. Convoy SC-130 was attacked by over 20 U-boats and lost no merchants while sinking 5 submarines. By month's end, German U-boat losses totaled 43 submarines, approximately 40% of the operational force, while Allied merchant losses were the lowest in 2 years. Grand Admiral Dönitz, commanding the U-boat fleet, ordered withdrawal from North Atlantic convoy routes, acknowledging that losses were unsustainable. The order effectively conceded that Germany had lost the Battle of the Atlantic. The convoys would continue, Britain would remain supplied, and German strategy of starving Britain into submission had failed. The human endurance. The sustained operations required for effective convoy escort created physical and psychological stress that tested crews beyond normal military service expectations. The watch system required continuous manning of key positions despite crew size that was barely adequate. 4 hours on watch, 4 hours on standby for action stations, 4 hours for rest, except that rest was rarely possible because maintenance required attention, because conditions made sleep difficult, because action stations would interrupt any attempt at rest. After weeks at sea, accumulated sleep deprivation produced exhaustion that made every task harder and more dangerous. The diet was monotonous and often inadequate. Fresh food was consumed within days of leaving port. The rest of the voyage meant tinned food, hard biscuits, whatever could be prepared in the galley despite the ship's violent motion. Hot meals were impossible during severe weather when galley fires couldn't be safely maintained. Tea was constant, the traditional British solution to every difficulty, brewed whenever conditions permitted and consumed in quantities that seemed medically inadvisable but psychologically essential. The physical environment was punishing. Chronic exposure to cold caused numerous health problems. Frostbite was common on extremities. Trench foot affected sailors whose shoes never fully dried. Respiratory infections spread through crowded, damp accommodation. The violent motion caused injuries when sailors were thrown against hard surfaces or struck by loose equipment. Yet medical facilities were minimal. A small sick bay, staffed by someone with basic first aid training. No doctor, no capability for treating serious injuries or illnesses. The psychological stress came from constant awareness that U-boat attack could occur at any moment, combined with knowledge that corvettes themselves were vulnerable. A torpedo hit would likely sink a corvette within minutes, giving crew minimal time to abandon ship into North Atlantic water that would kill through hypothermia in 30 minutes. Survivors from torpedoed merchants needed rescue, requiring corvettes to stop in waters where U-boats had just demonstrated their presence, presenting stationary targets to submarines that might still be nearby. Yet morale remained surprisingly high through combination of factors that made endurance possible. The crews understood their mission's importance. They were protecting convoys that kept Britain alive. They took pride in their ships despite the discomfort, developing attachment to vessels that had kept them alive through storms and attacks. They maintained British military traditions even in hardship: proper tea, dry humour, understated complaints that acknowledged difficulties without dwelling on them. The strategic achievement justified the costs. Britain remained supplied throughout the war, despite Germany's sustained submarine campaign. Food imports continued, if at reduced levels and requiring strict rationing. Oil arrived to fuel military forces and industry. American military equipment reached Britain in quantities that allowed build-up for eventual invasion of Europe. None of this would have been possible without the convoy system and the escorts that protected it. The corvettes were an essential part of this achievement, despite their humble origins and uncomfortable conditions. They provided the quantity of escorts necessary for protecting convoys across Atlantic. They endured conditions that would have overwhelmed more sophisticated vessels. They demonstrated that unglamorous persistence could achieve strategic effects that tactical brilliance couldn't match. The floating coffins had kept Britain alive through years when German victory seemed possible, not through heroic battles that made dramatic stories, but through sustained operations that were tedious, uncomfortable, dangerous, and absolutely essential. The quiet victory. The crews who served on corvettes received limited recognition during war, and less afterward, their contribution overshadowed by more dramatic operations that generated headlines and acclaim. The nature of convoy escort duty made individual achievements difficult to identify and celebrate. Unlike aircrew who could claim specific kills or ground forces who captured territory, escort crews fought battles where success meant nothing happened. Convoys reached port without losses. U-boats were kept away from merchants. Operations proceeded without drama worth reporting. The distinction between brilliant tactical success and merely adequate performance was often invisible to observers who saw only that convoys arrived safely. The working conditions and appearance of corvettes also contributed to their lack of glamorous reputation. These were small, uncomfortable ships that rolled violently and looked ungainly. They lacked the impressive appearance of destroyers or the romantic appeal of submarines. Serving on corvette meant enduring miserable conditions for extended periods with minimal recognition, not the kind of service that generated stories civilians wanted to hear or that military publicists wanted to highlight. Yet the crews who served on these vessels understood what they'd accomplished. They'd fought through years of operations that tested physical and psychological endurance. They'd kept convoys safe despite U-boat attacks and Atlantic storms. They'd mastered equipment and tactics that had defeated German submarine campaign. Their unglamorous persistence had achieved strategic victory that was perhaps more important than any individual battle in the war. They'd kept Britain supplied and fighting when German strategy had been to starve the nation into surrender. Lieutenant Commander Thornton, who'd commanded HMS Campanula, through 3 years of convoy escort duty, was asked after the war about his service. His response was characteristic of the understated British approach. "We did what needed doing. The job was protecting convoys, and we protected them. The ships were uncomfortable, and the work was hard, but that's what we'd signed up for. I'm proud that we kept our convoys safe, and that Britain remained supplied. That's achievement enough." The floating coffins had won the Battle of the Atlantic not through dramatic naval battles, but through sustained operations that were unglamorous, uncomfortable, and absolutely essential. The victory belonged to crews who'd endured years at sea in vessels that were barely adequate, fighting enemy they rarely saw, achieving successes they couldn't always confirm. Their persistence, their competence, and their simple refusal to quit despite conditions that might excuse failure. These were the qualities that had defeated German submarine campaign and ensured Britain's survival. The achievement lacked drama, but it was perhaps the most important British victory of the entire war, won by ordinary sailors in inadequate ships who simply kept doing their duty until the job was done.